Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to another Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Wherever you are, whatever you may be doing, thank you so much for making Ref Brandon and the Todd Family a part of your day. We always greatly appreciate it. I know I've been saying all week long that coming up on Saturday we were going to talk about college football and the playoff system that looks like it's headed our way in 2023. It's not official yet, but it looks like it's happening. So you might as well go ahead and say it's official, even though it's not official. So that's what we're going to be talking about on today's video. So if you're a college football fan or know someone who is, please feel free to tell them to watch the video and leave your comments on the comment page on whether or not you agree with me, because I know I said earlier in the week that I think it's going to destroy college football. So I'm sure some of you who are college football fans have been wondering what I meant when I said that. So I wanted to explain it. What I mean by that is I don't think that it's going to actually destroy college football. I mean that it's going to destroy college football in the way that we know college football. And I know if you follow college football and you have friends and family that do as well, that people have said for years that in college football it's so special because every game matters. Every game matters. Well, now that's not the case. And you also have people that say, well, I like college football better than the NFL because in college they play for the love of the game, not for the love of the money. Well, now you really can't say that. So now if you like college football better, you just like it better because you like it better. It's not because every game is going to matter. And it's not because they're playing for the love of the game, because that's not true. This 12-game playoff is nothing but money. It's a way for the NCAA to make money. So you can no longer go around and tell people that college football is all about the love of the game, because that's not true. This is nothing but a money grab and a way for the NCAA to garner money. Now, it's going to be great as far as, having things to talk about with your friends, because now there's going to be more teams that have a chance to make the playoffs, and there's going to be more teams that become relevant. Because let's look at this. Ever since the playoffs started, you've had pretty much Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State make the playoff every single year. And then the fourth team, you've had Oklahoma a couple times. Georgia made it. You had Michigan State one year. I think Washington made it one year. But it's pretty much been Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State every single year. And then the fourth team has rotated. But Bama, Ohio State, and Clemson make it every year. That's not going to change. Bama, Ohio State, and Clemson are still going to make it every single year. But the only way to give other programs hope and to make other programs relevant is to expand the playoffs. You take Michigan, for example. Michigan is one of the most relevant football teams in America. Back in the mid to late 90s when I started watching football, Michigan was a top 5, top 10 team every single year. They're not now, but they still have the tradition that they've always had. And that's why when I made my video a couple of weeks ago about Jim Harbaugh being on the hot seat, that's the reason why I've got him on the hot seat. Because Michigan expects to win 10 or 11 games every single year, and Harbaugh just does not do that. And Michigan, even though they have one of the most loyal fan bases in the country, and they have one of the best traditions in the country, they are $80 million in debt. So if a program like Michigan, with all that rich tradition they have, and that huge alumni following and alumni base they have, is $80 million in debt, then you can imagine how far in debt some of the other programs are. The only way to try to make up that debt is to make them believe and make them feel like they've got a chance to go to the playoffs. Otherwise, their fans aren't going to be pouring all their money into the program because you feel like you're pouring money into a average, mediocre program that's not going to do anything. But now with the 12-team playoff, you're going to have more teams and more fans and more fan bases that feel like they've got a playoff shot. And they do, but it makes college football no longer about the love of the game. It's about the love of the money, just like the NFL. So if you follow both, that's fine. If you like college better, that's fine. But if you like college better, you're going to have to just be honest with yourself and just say, I like college better. You can no longer say every game's going to matter. You can no longer say college is all about the love of the game, because it's not so. But I will say that I do think it's going to make it more interesting with these coaching hires in the future, because if you just look, for example, Notre Dame's coach, Brian Kelly, he started out at Central Michigan. He left there. He went to Cincinnati. He left there. He went to Notre Dame. You look at Butch Jones. He did just like Brian Kelly. He took the Central Michigan job when Brian Kelly left. He took the Cincinnati job when Brian Kelly left. And then he went to Tennessee. Of course, this year he's back at Arkansas State. Tennessee's coach right now, Josh Heupel, he left Central Florida to go to Tennessee. Auburn's new head coach, Brian Harsin, he left Boise State to go to Auburn. And these coaches are doing this because they want to win national championships. But they knew at those smaller schools they couldn't do that. But now they really have no reason to leave the school they're at. Now, of course, you'll still have, the smaller programs like a Middle Tennessee State or a Florida Atlantic that, of course, they're never going to go to a 12-team playoff. But a lot of these smaller so-called programs like a Boise State or a Cincinnati or a Central Florida that are proven winners and they're good year in, year out, their coaches no longer have a reason to leave and go to a Power 5 program because they can stay at Boise State or stay at Cincinnati and go to the playoffs. So if you can go to the playoffs where you are, why would you leave? Because if you stay where you are and you go to the playoffs, every time you go, you're just going to keep getting a raise, keep getting a raise, keep getting a raise. So there's no reason to leave where you are. So it should make it better in the future when these teams have coach openings, because it's not going to be so easy to go out and get a coach from one of those so-called smaller schools because they're having success and going to the playoffs where they are. I mean, Luke Fickell is Cincinnati's coach, and there's been a rumor for a long time that he was eventually going to leave and go to a bigger school, especially after the great season they had in 2020. But if Cincinnati keeps being a top 10 team, why would he leave? Unless you get a job like an Alabama or a Clemson or Ohio State, which none of those jobs are going to be opening anytime soon. But unless you're going to leave to go to one of those schools, you have just as good of a chance at going to the playoffs at Cincinnati as you do with any other team. But back to what I was saying earlier, now you're going to have teams that go 9-3 and go to the playoffs. And that's fine. It's going to happen because when you have 12 playoff teams, somebody's going to go 9-3 and make the playoffs. So you can no longer say that every game matters, because that's 3 games where you lost and you still made the playoffs. So that's 3 games that did not matter because you lost them and you still made the playoffs. And I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm saying there's a chance that it might happen. Let's just say, for example, 2023 comes around and we have the playoffs. And let's say Ohio State is 11-0. So they know even if they lose their last game, they're going to the playoffs. They might fall from a 2 seed to a 4 seed or a 1 seed to a 4 seed. But if you finish 11-1, you're going to the playoffs. So let's say Ohio State goes into their last game at 11-0 and they bench their entire starting lineup because they know that game doesn't matter. They're still going to be one of the top 4 seeds. They're still going to the playoffs, and they're still going to be the home team in the second week of the playoffs. So Ohio State played a game where they pretty much benched their entire starting lineup, and they lost. And what happened? They still made the playoffs. So by all accounts, truth be told, truth be known, that game really meant absolutely nothing. And I personally don't like that. That's always been what I've always enjoyed about college football, was that really truly it was the only sport to where every single game meant something. And now that's not so. Now it's still so for the teams I talked about earlier, like a Boise State and a Central Florida and a Cincinnati, because all three of those teams are not going to make the playoffs. It's just not going to happen. They're going to take one of those teams every year. So if one of them goes 12-0 and the other two go 11-1, well, the one that went 12-0 is the one that's going to go to the playoffs. So for those teams, every game still matters. But for the blue bloods of college football, and the reason why I say blue bloods is because that's the word they use in college basketball when they're talking about, Duke and Kansas and Kentucky and North Carolina. So we'll use the college basketball term and say blue bloods. You know as well as I know that Alabama's still going to make it every year. Clemson's still going to make it every year. Ohio State's still going to make it every year. Oklahoma's going to make it every year. Georgia's going to make it every year. I mean, they're just blue blood college football programs that have the following and have the tradition. So those teams are going to be allowed to go 9-3, and they will still go to the playoffs. They've even said now that the playoffs is going to be the 6 teams that win their division or conference, which is funny because you only have 5 major Power 5 conferences. So they really didn't say which conference is going to be that 6th conference, but they did say it'll be the 6 highest rated conference winners and then 6 at-large schools. Now, this is a good way for a team like Cincinnati or Central Michigan to make the playoffs, because there was a time back in the early turn of the century when Boise State still had Dan Hawkins, and then right after he left and they had Chris Peterson, there was a couple of years in there when they had Jared Zabransky and then Kellen Moore, and they had Ian Johnson and all those players that I really feel like Boise State could have won a national championship. Now, we'll never know because they never got in, never had a chance. There was no playoffs back then. But I've always been a firm believer that if Boise State would have had a chance, they could have won a national championship. I would have loved to have seen it. I mean, you think about all the teams they beat back then. They beat Oregon twice. They beat Virginia Tech. They beat Georgia. They beat Oklahoma. I mean, they beat all the big-time teams that they played, but you still had people say, well, that's because it's a one-time thing. They're not any good. And people are always going to say that. They're not going to change their mind. I mean, they're wrong, but they're always going to think that. If you can't watch Boise State back in those days and see the talent they had, then you just don't know college football. But, I mean, it was easy to see how good they actually were. So there was a time back in those days that I really think Boise State could have won a national championship, but they never had a chance. And every single year, it seems like there's one of those teams from a non-Power 5 conference that's really, really good, but there's so many people that won't give them a chance because of the conference they play in. Well, now they can no longer hold them back. One of those teams is going to get in every single year. I don't think it's going to be Boise State. I think their time to shine was back in the 2000s when they were a top 5 team every year. Now I think they're just an average football team. But you will see somebody like a Central Florida or Cincinnati or maybe a Memphis, because Memphis is also really good, that's going to sneak up there and be a top 10 team and get in. And then we'll actually see how good they can do against the big-time schools. But the only way you're going to find out how good those teams really are is to put them in the playoff, because you're always going to have the people that say they're not good because their conference sucks, which has never made any sense to me. I can watch a team and I can see talent. I don't give a rip what conference you play in. If you've got talent, you're good. But there are those people out there that are always going to hold those programs back and always say they're no good just because of who they play. And then you're going to have those people that want to see those teams get in just to see if a Cinderella can make a national championship run. Just like a few years back in college basketball, you had George Mason. You also had the University of Illinois Chicago a few years back make a run. So it would be good to see one of those smaller schools actually get in and see what they can do. But the only way to shut those programs up is to put them in there. That way, if they get in, if they get destroyed, then you can tell them, hey, you had your chance, you blew it. But if they get in and they actually win a game or two and get down to the semifinals or the quarterfinals or the national championship, then I think there'll be more years where you'll see those teams get more and more publicity because they've proven how good they actually are. So I do think that there's some good behind the college football playoff, and I think in the long run it is good because it's going to make more programs and more teams relevant because you're going to see something in the playoffs besides Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, and then just whoever the fourth team is. So it's good from that perspective. I'm just saying, from my perspective, it destroys college football as far as we can no longer say that college football is all about the love of the game. We can no longer say in college football every game matters because that's not true. And you also have to look at it from a fan perspective. Now, I've got a friend that's going to watch this video named Eric, and I've got a friend that's going to watch this video named Mike, and they've got plenty of money. When they lay down at night, that they sleep in money. Their bed and their sheets and their blankets is nothing but money. But most of us people don't have that kind of money. So you got to think about it from a fan perspective. If you pull for a team that has a chance to go to the playoffs and you want to go to a regular season game, but you really can't afford to go to a regular season game or maybe more than one game and go to the playoffs, you're going to hold back that season ticket because when the playoffs come around, you're going to want to follow your team, to Tampa or Pasadena or New Orleans or Phoenix or wherever you're playing at. And most of the time, unless you're going to Tampa or Atlanta, when you're going somewhere far away, you're going to have to buy a plane ticket. You're going to have to buy a motel room and the price of the ticket to the game, wherever the game is. So you're talking about easily $400, $500, $600. So there's no way you're going to be able to go to all those regular season games and the playoff games. And if you pull for a team and you think they've got a chance to make it, or they're going to make it, especially if it's a team that has never made the playoffs or has not made it in a long time, you're going to want to travel with them so you can be there in case your team wins. I mean, that's what every fan wants. So it's going to make these attendance numbers drop way down for a lot of these teams when the playoffs start because most fans are not going to be able to afford going to all the regular season games and going to the playoff games. And if you ask any college football fan that is not like Eric or Mike and rolling in money, if they have the option of going to a regular season game or going to a playoff game, which one are they going to pick? Well, they're going to pick the playoff game. Anybody would. So it's going to make a lot of the attendance numbers in the regular season go down. And for most of these programs, a lot of the money that you make during the season is from season tickets. So if your attendance numbers drop down by even a quarter, look at all the thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars that you just lost because all those season ticket holders are no longer buying season tickets, or even the ones that just buy a ticket to a game or two. Well, you're not going to do that because you might want to use that money for a playoff run. Because a lot of these times, especially if you travel by plane, a lot of these booking companies, if you buy a plane ticket and then you cancel, you lose your money. So you want to make sure that you've got the money saved up so that when you buy that plane ticket, you have the money. And if you lose the money, it's okay because you had it put back. It wasn't like $1,000 that you just had and all of a sudden it's gone. You had that $1,000 put back. So I do think it's going to hurt a lot of these programs' attendance numbers because most fans, you want to go see your team in the playoffs. And unless you're a top 4 seed, If you win your first round, then after that, you've got to travel and you want to be there. Any fan would want to be there in attendance when their team plays, whoever they're playing, wherever they're playing. I mean, you look at the SEC network. The SEC network, their major line is it just means more, which I've never understood. What means more? Winning means more, losing means more, cheating means more. I don't know what that means. They've never clarified. They just say it just means more. But now you can't say that anymore because guess what? It doesn't mean more. You lose a game, you're still in the playoffs. You lose 2 games, you're still in the playoffs. And I just don't want college football to be like the NBA. If you follow the NBA, you look at how many major NBA stars that now in the middle of the season they'll just tell their coach, I don't want to play today. And then fans go to the game and they went to the game to see, Kawhi Leonard, or they went to the game to see Kemba Walker, or they went to the game to see Zion Williamson, and then they want their money back because they spent that $75-$80 to go watch that superstar, and that superstar didn't play. You think about if you're a college football fan, and let's just say, for example, that your team is Florida, and we know Florida State now has that transfer quarterback that came in from Central Florida. And let's say you're a Florida fan and it's a couple years down the road and Florida State has finally gotten back to Florida State football and Florida State has this great quarterback, and even though you're a Florida fan and you want Florida to win, you're going to go to the Florida State game just because you want to see that Florida State quarterback, whoever he is. And then you get there and it's 30 minutes before kickoff, and then they come out with breaking news that Florida State's quarterback just decided he ain't going to play today. It's end of the season. This game don't mean anything. I mean, if I was a fan and I had bought a ticket to that game to see that player and that player wasn't going to play, I would be upset about it. And I'm afraid that's what's going to happen with this college football expansion, because you're going to have teams, especially the Blue Bloods, that know if they lose a couple games, it's not a big deal. We're going to the playoffs. Going to the playoffs is a whole lot more important than that one game. And I hope that doesn't happen, but I do think that it's going to be good for conversation, especially if you live in a part of the country, wherever you live at, where college football is extremely popular, because no matter where you live at, not everybody in that city or in that state is going to be a fan of that particular state's team. There's always going to be people that's going to pull for, a team in another conference in another state. So, if you pull for a team that's there local, but you've got friends that don't, and say the friend pulls for a team that's not any good, so they never want to talk about college football because their team's not any good. Well, now all of a sudden, they may want to talk about it because they know, even if their team is a 9-3 team, that now has a chance of, going to the playoffs. But my main problem with the whole thing is I just don't like the fact that we still have 13 people that go in a room and they get to decide who makes the playoffs. I mean, yes, there's a little bit of criteria as far as you're going to have to win your conference if you play in one of the 5 major conferences. I get that. But outside of that, it's just 13 people that sit in a room and they say, put this team in, put this team in. I mean, to me, if you're going to have a 12-team playoff, you should have either more criteria to decide who gets in, or you need to have more people involved in the process. Because those people that are in that room always are going to go by the team that has the bigger name, the team that has, the best quarterback or the best running back or the best coach or the best atmosphere. And none of those things should have any relevance at all as far as, do you make the playoffs? Yeah, you might have the best quarterback in the country, but if you're 8-4, you still shouldn't go to the playoffs. So to me, if you're going to expand the playoffs to 12 teams, you need to add more criteria, or have more people involved in the voting process, because it's just not fair to take 13 people. And I know they claim that they sit down and they watch every single game. But if you believe that, you're foolish. I don't. I think they just sit around and they just talk, and whichever teams get the most votes are the teams that get in. Because there's no way these games are played on Saturday and by Monday you know who the best teams are. So in one 24-hour stretch, you watched 60 football games. That's not possible. So let's just be honest, and we know that those 13 people do not watch every single game. It's just not possible. They're not doing it. So let's don't try to fool ourselves and say they are, because we know they're not. And I just don't think it's fair that 13 people get to decide which teams make the playoffs. Because as long as it's that way, you're still going to have the blue blood programs that are going to get in every single year just because of their name. And that's not fair. So I think that's my biggest complaint of the whole thing, is that you've got 13 people that just get to sit down and say, put this team in. No rhyme, no reason, just put them in. And no other sport does that. But it is funny to me that now you've got a 12-game regular season, which it's been that way for about 10 years now. And now your conference championship is going to give you 13 games. And unless you're one of the top 4 seeds and you get a bye in the first round, if you're a 5 through 12 seed, you've got to play in the first round. So you've got 12 regular season games, a 13th game for your conference championship, and then 4 playoff games. How many games is that? 17. Who plays 17 games? The NFL does now. So college football is trying their best to make college football just like the NFL. And it's also funny to me that for the longest time they've said they can't have an 18 playoff, or they can't have a 12-team playoff, because of the fact these kids won't get, no winter break, as far as they won't get to see their family, maybe not on Christmas, but around Christmas. So they always wanted to end the regular season. It was always the first Saturday in December, and then they would take about 2 weeks off, and usually bowl games started around the 18th or the 19th, and then you pretty much had a bowl game every day up until Christmas. There was none on Christmas, and then the 26th, you started bowl games again, and they went all the way through the first of the year. They've always said that for the student athlete, family's so important. Well, guess what? Now, the regular season is going to end, and the very next week, playoffs are going to start. So guess who now is going to get no time at home with their friends and family during the winter break, during the holiday season? The players. You know why? Because it's all about money. Now, I'm not complaining, because I think it's going to be better as far as, conversation-wise. But I think it's just bad that they've taken away the love of the game for college football, and they've turned it into the love of the money, just like the NFL. And now they're playing 17 games, which is the exact same amount of games that the NFL plays. So they're trying their best to make college football make the kind of money that the NFL makes. So it's all about the money now, which is fine with me as long as people still watch. I just think they've taken it from playing for the love of the game to taking it to playing for the love of money, especially now with this name, image, likeness that's fixing to start. Now the players are going to be getting paid already, plus you're adding the playoffs on. So it's no longer about the love of the game. It's now about the love of the money. But like I said earlier, it will make it better now for, the coaches, because a lot of these coaches are no longer going to leave their smaller schools and go to a bigger school, because now if you coach at one of the smaller schools but you go 12-0 or 11-1, you're probably going to make the playoffs. But if you have any thoughts on this, anything, whether you agree with me or don't agree with me, please feel free to let me know. I try my best to respond to everybody, and I want somebody to talk me off a ledge and tell me that I'm crazy and that this 12-team playoff is nothing but good. And I know a lot of people are going to like it, and then you're going to have a lot of people that are not going to like it because it's change. And as humans, we don't like change. No matter what it is, we get stuck in our own little situation about anything, and when something changes, we don't like it. That's just how we're made to operate. I mean, you look at Major League Baseball, and I remember in '93 when they expanded and brought the Marlins in. Everybody thought that was just the worst thing in the world. But it was just adding another team, and then it worked because in '97 they won the World Series. When the Rockies started, it was a terrible idea. When the Diamondbacks started, it was a terrible idea. In the NBA just a few years back, when the Charlotte Hornets came back, or originally Charlotte Bobcats and then Charlotte Hornets, it was a terrible idea. Because people don't like change. No matter what it is, especially if it involves expansion, we don't like it. And that's all this is the college football playoffs are expanding from 4 teams to 12 teams. And I really believe the reason why they went to 12 teams instead of 8 teams is going back to what I was talking about earlier with the smaller programs like a Central Florida or a Cincinnati. Because there will be people, and if you don't know one, you watch football long enough, you'll meet one. There will be people that if Cincinnati goes 12-0 and LSU goes 9-3, there will be people that'll still want to put a 9-3 LSU team in the playoffs over a 12-0 team because of the fact Central Florida or Cincinnati didn't play anybody. They don't deserve to get in. So if you went to an 18 playoff, you would still see teams like Central Florida or Cincinnati that would get shafted because of the conference they play in. They can't help what conference they're in. That's just the conference they got put in. That's their conference. But with it going to 12 teams, if somebody like that is to go 12-0 or 11-1, they will make the playoffs. So I think they did this because they want to see one of these smaller schools actually get in to see what they can actually do when they play the blue bloods of college football. That, and back to what I said earlier about Michigan being $80 million in debt. And that's just the only number from the only school that I know. They've kind of been outspoken about, how far in debt that they are. But I'm sure there are other programs that are also in debt, but they don't talk about it as openly as Michigan has. But you can bet if Michigan's that much in debt and that far in debt, that other programs are as well. So the only way to try to make these programs more relevant and hopefully try to get them more money is to expand the playoffs and give them a chance to get in, especially considering Alabama and Clemson and Ohio State get in every year, and they're pretty much down here in the South, or at least close to the South, especially when you got Alabama. And the year Georgia got in, you had Alabama, Clemson, and Georgia. You had 3 teams within a 300-mile radius in the playoffs. So for everybody else in the country, it didn't matter. So the playoff numbers that year, as far as TV ratings, they were terrible. But the reason why they were terrible was because you had 3 out of the 4 teams that were in the playoffs all played in the same general vicinity. So nobody in California cared. Nobody in Maryland cared. Nobody in Maine cared. The last 2 or 3 years, the number 1 rated TV hotspot as far as ratings go for college football, the city that's had the best ratings for college football for either 2 or 3 straight years is Birmingham, Alabama. And college football is never going to make any money when the number 1 market for TV ratings is Birmingham, Alabama. Especially considering there's not even a team in Birmingham. I mean, you have UAB, but I mean, let's be honest. How many actual UAB fans do you know? I'll wait. But that's not going to work. The only way you're going to make money is have these big, huge teams that have big, huge followings that play in big cities that have a market that watches. When your number 1 market is Birmingham, Alabama, you're not making any money. So they've got to do something. They've got to change it up and see if they can start making these big cities with big time teams start watching college football again. And I want somebody to talk me off the ledge and tell me that this is the greatest thing ever, because I like it, because it's going to make the season better and it's going to give us more teams to talk about. Now we're going to be able to talk about somebody besides the same 4 or 5 teams. But I don't like it because it's turned into the money, and that's what always made college football different. So if you can talk me off the ledge and tell me I'm crazy, I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. But those are my feelings on the college football playoff and why I'm not really a big fan of it. In case you haven't heard, the vote's not official yet, so it's not official yet that it's going to happen. But from every article that I've read, for all intents and purposes, it's pretty much official without being official. But the 1 through 4 seeds will get a bye in the first round, and then 5 will play 12, 6 plays 11, and 7 will play 10, and 8 will play 9. And then those 4 winners will go to the next round. And when 5 plays 12 and 6 plays 11, the games will be played at the higher seeded team's home stadium. So now some of these teams will get to actually host a playoff game. Just wanted to make sure I put that out there just in case you weren't sure what the qualifications were going to be or where the games were going to be played at. And then the 4 teams that get a first round bye, they will host in the second round against the people that won in the first week. But if you have any thoughts on that, please feel free to let me know. I would love to talk about it and be talked off the ledge and somebody convince me that this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. So if you feel that way, please feel free to let me know. We'll go ahead and get our dad joke of the day. Tomorrow, we're going to be back into wrestling. We're going to be previewing WWE's Hell in a Cell, which comes up tomorrow night. So we're going to preview it tomorrow and run down the matches and see if anybody has any thoughts on the pay-per-view before it happens tomorrow night. But I know that SpongeBob is the main character, but Patrick is the star. And that wraps it up for another Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Until next time, it's Ref Brandon saying, just like in pro wrestling, life can be over by the count of 3. Tell your friends and family how much you love them.